Well, we're now in 2021, and there was an initial drop in employment as people pulled back from the dangers of the virus pandemic. But slowly but surely, people are getting hired again. And the world has changed. The world is now virtual, which means your job interview is likely to be virtual. No face to face. I'm not even hearing about socially distant in person job interviews. Well, in an environment where things have changed, you have to adapt to interviewing in a virtual environment. And I want you to stay tuned right to the end of this video because I'm going to share with you a ninja communication technique that is going to make you memorable in the course of your interview. Well, let's get on with it. First thing to do is remember that all the typical things you have to do for a job interview still hold true. You want to, of course, be on time. You want to write thank you notes for the people who facilitated your interview and for the people who conducted your interview. Those rules have not gone out the door. You also want to dress professionally. The first step is really looking at your social media profile because more and more employers are trying to pull in any information they can about their candidates. They are relying on these other sources of information and turning to your social media profiles. Now, when I worked in the emergency room, we could find a whole lot about a person by investigating their social media presence. Oftentimes it would make a difference in terms of understanding where the person was in the state they were coming into us. When a company turns to your online work, ask yourself, what does my online presence look like? Do you have anything on Facebook that your grandmother would be embarrassed to see? Clean that up. People will look at that. They don't want to see times where you are at the pre-marriage party and intoxicated and acting silly. That doesn't speak well for you. So erase all that stuff. On LinkedIn, what is your headline? What are your highlights? Do you have links to samples of your work? Do you have testimonials or endorsements from people in your network? These are really important in terms of that collateral information. I would suggest that you ask your friends to check out your LinkedIn profile from the perspective of a prospective employer and get their feedback and make those adjustments. Now, video conferencing has become the norm in the pandemic, and I'm actually shooting this video on my video platform that I use every day for seeing my clients. Anyone who's used this knows that it can be a little bit prickly at times. So do your best to make sure that your interview is as smooth as possible. Check your internet connection. Check also how many people are on your Wi-Fi system and ask that you have a clear path on the Wi-Fi system so you don't have other users diverting signal, causing things like audio or video dropout. Is your microphone working? Troubleshoot all of this before you have the interview. You also want to create a professional background, and this can be done virtually. I like Canva because it's a free program. They have a big library of pictures that you can use, and you can go through that and create a background. I'm also going to share some other resources with you online that will tune up your interview. But create that professional setting. It should be tested in advance. If you're going to present some things, some parts of your work, make sure that they're downloaded appropriately and you can bring them up smoothly. The adage is practice, practice, and more practice. When at all possible, keep the background noise out of the picture. There is an app that I use called Crisp, K-R-I-S-P, and I'll put a link down below. so you can readily do that. And what it does is it eliminates background noise when you're on a teleconferencing call. It's pretty effective. In full disclosure, I have no relationship with this company. All I can say is I use their product and it eliminates my barking dog when someone comes to the door. And that's a nice thing to not have in the background. Let's take a minute. I want you to take just a moment, if this is something useful for you, to hit the little thumbs up, give it a like. I would appreciate that. That also helps in terms of this video getting seen. The other thing I want you to do is share this video with others, because, if you're watching this video and looking at the perspective of a job interview, I would bet you know some other people that are going to be in the same position. Well, distractions are going to happen in the course of an interview. Acknowledge the distractions you can't control. Call this out as soon as the meeting begins so no one gets caught off guard with this. This is showing that you're a real person dealing with very human concerns, and you give it some grace and some appreciation. It says a lot about a person's resilience, that they can manage kids at home, being a substitute teacher indefinitely. It says a lot about you and your ability to manage multiple things at once. If an interviewer isn't really willing to understand or tolerate this sort of life circumstance, is this someone you really want to work for? Boy, doesn't that say a lot about the company? That's food for thought in terms of, looking at who you work for. Let's talk about floating head syndrome. We lose as much as 90% of communication because it's nonverbal. We don't get to see the small movements that show that a person's anxious or their breathing has changed, because we just get a kind of shoulders up view. I notice this in my therapy sessions. Frankly, they aren't as much fun. There's a fundamental difference between seeing a person's head from the shoulders up and seeing their whole body. I can see if their legs are fidgeting. It gives you dimensionality. So what I'm going to suggest is that you set up your viewing so the interviewers can see more of your body. I've seen the difference firsthand with my clients who are a talking head versus ones where they're sitting back in a chair, and I can see when they cross their legs and whatnot. It just plain transmits better. So, a quick question for you. What part of the body do interviewers look at most? And I'll give you a hint. It is exactly the same for both men and women. Stumped on this one? Well, it's your hands. And this is biologically ingrained because our hands hold weapons. The whole tradition of why we shake with our right hand is because that typically held a sword and your left a shield. And it essentially is hardwired that we look for threat. And that dates very back in our development as human beings. So that's another reason for you to show more of your body and make sure that's animated. You want to not do jazz hands, but have open hands, a very open posture, the same as you would in an interview if you were live in person. The other difficulty is you're going to lose 90% of communication for the people interviewing you. We get little sense of how we're being received when we miss these cues. We lack all these subtle cues. We only have people's voice. So I suggest you periodically check in with the interviewer. Ask if you're answering the question asked. Ask if you're giving too much or too little information. Trust me, the interviewer is going to appreciate you checking in. And it, frankly, it demonstrates emotional intelligence. Keep your energy high. Zoom fatigue is real. In fact, I even did a video on this, which you can check out. Our energy tends to project lower. Make sure to remember to smile. A simple smile goes a long way. Close out all the other tabs on your screen just to get rid of those distractions. You may wish to close out your own picture because oftentimes we get self-conscious when we see ourselves. This is one of the things I suggest to reduce Zoom fatigue and the anxiety that sometimes comes with being on a screen. Be prepared to share stories that you're excited about. Ask questions that demonstrate that you have done your prep work about the company and your curiosity. Make sure that the questions are relevant to what we're all facing. A good question might be, how has your company shifted its strategy during the virus pandemic? It puts your resilience out there. And resilience is such a buzzword in this time of COVID, but it's still relevant. Let them know that you've adapted to the virus. Companies want people with this kind of resilience and folks who can deal with setbacks. And this is a setback. Find spots that highlight moments of failure that taught you something and led you to new change. This might have been challenges that you overcame or difficult feedback. Now, let's get to that ninja science trick. You get to ask questions about the company. And I want you to ask the interviewers, what about their working there are they most proud of? Or what about working there really got their juices flowing and got them excited? This is a crucial question, not only for the information, but what happens neurologically when you pull them back into positive experience is the brain lets off a little burst of dopamine. Dopamine is the pleasure chemical. And guess what? It gets associated with you and your personality. And it makes a profound impression when you create that linkage and you become more memorable in the eyes of the interviewer. It is a really, really helpful way of seeding your presence in with the interviewers. And the reality is we need a total of 7 repetitions before we spontaneously remember things. You want to do your best to make yourself memorable. Well, this is G.H. Glade for Coaching ADD, and I will see you next week with another video. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. I would appreciate that. And most of all, share the video. You're not the only one in this boat. Take care and have a good day.